Hey everybody, Mike Miller, Herald Times, joined by columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you after Indiana's 76-70 loss in overtime here to Iowa at Carver Hawkeye. Just another one of those games for Indiana. Just one hell of a February. Just continues to get more frustrating by the day for the Hoosiers. Effort was there again, played hard, and I thought actually played pretty well through some pretty important stretches in this one. Led by 7 in the second half. Ultimately couldn't close. Ultimately fell to some clutch shooting from Jordan Bohannon, who's made a name for himself with that kind of shooting this month. Yet again, just daggers at the end of regulation. Had 3 in overtime. Especially frustrating for an Indiana team that for a second straight game was not getting bit by the three-point ball as it has so often this Big Ten season. I think it held Purdue to 20%, its season low on Tuesday night. Came here tonight. Iowa had 3 three-pointers in the first 39 minutes of regulation. Then, like I said, an absolute dagger by Bohannon ties it, forces overtime, and it was the Jordan Bohannon show in that extra frame itself.
Yeah, pretty much. Seen that movie before. Most of the Big Ten's seen that movie this year at some point, it seems like, really. It's just one of those things you just kind of shake your head, tip your cap. What else are you going to do? I mean, right now, this Indiana team is borderline cursed, really, when it comes to the end of games. And we were sitting there, and I said to you, Indiana just needs to make a shot. And Juwan Morgan hits a 3, and you're like, well, they're almost there. They probably need like one more, and all they got was a Tennessee free throw, split a pair. And yeah, I mean, free throw line, that pretty much sums it up right there. I mean, Indiana's, 12 of 22 free throws. Yep. So even on a normal night, if you knock down 4 or 5 more, we're not even having this conversation about overtime.
Outside of Romeo Langford, they were 8 for 17. So even so, not even. Still right around there, but yeah, it was just a...
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, sometimes this game is really simple. You've got to make your shots, and this team's inability to make three-pointers and free throws continues to bite it in the butt time after time after time. And then Iowa, on the other hand, has Jordan Bohannon, who does basically nothing all game, and then hits the game-tying three-pointer in regulation, 3 more three-pointers in overtime, and there you go. You're headed back to Bloomington with a loss.
It's crazy. I mean, this whole season. I mean, and here you go. You get these last 2, maybe 3 of the last 4 games where you're starting to see these games are almost developing in ways they were early in the season. Those games, of course, Indiana was finding ways to win in the last few minutes. You go back to the Ohio State game. Wasn't pretty, but Indiana was right there in the last few minutes. Purdue just the same. Iowa just the same. But the pendulum has swung completely in the opposite direction now, where you're getting into these same situations you were in November, December, and yet just closing has been an elusive quality.
Yeah, I thought very much this game had much more of a December quality to it. The way Indiana played, the way it fought, it refused to back down. And, even when it went through the typical scoring drought in the first half, they went through their usual 4+ minute scoring drought. But instead of wilting and letting that turn into a huge negative, they just kind of kept fighting, got some defensive stops until they could finally get back on the offensive side of things. In the second half, they came out, started the second half, took the lead, never trailed the entire second half. Seemed like every time Iowa made a run, they kept turning them back, never let Iowa get over the hump. Even when Indiana only had a 3-point lead, it kind of felt like Indiana was in control of this game, and they just sort of dictated the way this game was played. Did pretty much everything you would want them to do, except for execute in the last 2 minutes of the game. It's I don't know. It's just one of those things. At some point, you figure it's going to go the other way, and especially if this team plays with this kind of effort and intensity, the way they're playing right now. I think Deron Davis has really given this team an infusion of toughness and swagger and some leadership. I think tonight was also maybe a little bit of a passing of the torch. In terms of Justin Smith, spent most of tonight on the bench. We saw a lot more of Race Thompson. We saw a little bit of Jake Forrester. We even saw good Evan Fitzner back from wherever he's been since the end of November, or since the Duke game, basically. So I mean, there were a ton of things to like if this game turns out any other way than the way it did.
Yeah.
And instead it turns out with just another sour taste in Indiana's mouth. If this team started feeling sorry for itself or started feeling snake bitten or something, I wouldn't really blame them at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like the fact that, I even suggested to Deron Davis that this team might be cursed, and his response is, it's Indiana. Mm-hmm. Basically, you're going to get everybody's best shot. It means something to beat Indiana for these teams. They don't care whether you've lost 1 in a row or 12 of 13, whatever. Indiana still means something, and I think that's an important thing to remember, that mm-hmm. nobody's taking it easy on this team. Nobody's going to feel sorry for Indiana, and nor should they.
Yeah.
It's part of being Indiana is you're going to take everybody's best shot, and it's these guys' job to rise to the occasion and somehow, some way, find a way to rebound this last 2 weeks of the regular season.
I thought it was actually important to hear someone say that, what Deron Davis said in that
mm-hmm.
situation, because it did feel so. It felt as January was just dragging on, and even here in February, it felt at times where you wondered if IU's players actually realized that or really believed it. Because obviously, like you said, teams go into Assembly Hall, they know where they're going. I mean, you ask any Big Ten player, you ask them, favorite place to play in the Big Ten, it's Assembly Hall, because the crowd is on top of you. It's just a fun atmosphere to play basketball. I mean, Indiana is not the program it used to be. It's arguably irrelevant on the national level right now, but teams still get up for that game when they see Indiana on the court, and it felt like for so long this season, Indiana was not mindful of that simple fact. Mm-hmm. But as you were saying, given the way this team I think has played the last week or so, the Minnesota game aside, it's actually so frustrating to watch. But I think if you're an Indiana fan, you can at least enjoy some of these games now. And I think we were talking about this after the Purdue game. I mean, maybe now you can start to see some pieces being placed. There's a whole long way to go till next season, but you can maybe start to build some things and put some pieces together for next season. Obviously Evan Fitzner his contributions were much appreciated tonight for Indiana, but a little bit too late, too late in his season. But again, you see guys like Deron Davis and Race Thompson. I thought was a really bright spot. The way he was rebounding in the first half, still very unsure of himself, I think, situationally, which could be expected. But the ability to actually have him go out there and give you some hustle minutes out there. And again, like you said, I thought it was also telling that Justin Smith didn't play after halftime. I think he was a -8 at halftime and didn't see the court the rest of the way. So, you're not playing for a postseason at this point, really. But as you said, there are definitely some steps that you could take to maybe position yourself better for next season. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of things you see over what this team's missed this year and what it could be next year. I thought tonight was probably Rob Finney's best game since December, since before the concussion, basically. And I think it kind of reminded you of how much that really set him back.
Absolutely.
Race Thompson, he's just getting his feet wet. He's just started playing in the last week, so you can understand that there's some hesitancy, there's some uncertainty for him when he's in the game, because this is his first action of his career. This is what he should have been figuring out back in November and December against UT Arlington and UC Davis and teams like that, and instead he's trying to figure this out against Minnesota and Purdue and Iowa. So it's night and day difference. You see now probably as healthy a Deron Davis as we've maybe ever seen at Indiana at this point,
at least since last November,
or at least the best version of Deron Davis we've seen at Indiana right now. And you see how much obviously his Achilles injury last year hurt this team, how much the recovery from that process, and I don't want to say that he was rushing back the beginning of this year, because I don't, obviously there wasn't any danger in what he was doing necessarily, but he was trying to get back as quick as he could, but he wasn't all the way there yet, in the process obviously tweaked an ankle or whatever it was that set him back, and so he's just now kind of getting to be the player that we thought he could be. And what you hope is that if he can come back next year and really solidify that center position, instead of having to play a guy like Jawan Morgan this year, or instead of sticking a Race Thompson. Race Thompson played some of the 5 tonight, and that's nice, but Race Thompson is not a 5. He doesn't belong playing the 5. So a lot of things like that you see with this team, and And Fitzner, even though he's not going to be here next year, I thought gave a good model for a Race Thompson, for Jake Forrester, for Justin Smith if he gets his stuff together or whatever, and how to play in a zone. He was actually a threat. He'd catch the ball and face up to the basket, shot some of those mid-range games. Some of these other guys, you might as well have been throwing them a grenade in the middle of that zone. They just wanted to get rid of the thing as quick as possible. So, probably if there was, Al Durham probably was the one guy that seemed like he was missing in action tonight, but he was in foul trouble most of the night. So, anyway, litany of things that I think are positives and can build on if this team can play with this kind of effort and focus. And like I said, it's just a lot of things this team has missed this year that sometimes it's easy to forget what it has lacked.
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely. Again, got to be a frustrating team to watch if you're an IU fan, but at least you can stomach these games in a weird sort of way, just knowing that a couple free throws here and there maybe is a difference, or a couple plays other way. But yeah, I mean, entertaining game, I'll say that.
Yeah, much more palatable basketball. Heck, compared to the Purdue game, this was poetry in motion. But I don't think that's not the bigger concern. I think the bigger concern is the competitiveness of this team and its willingness to compete, and that's what it's shown the last two games. If you do that, then sooner or later you figure something's going to break your way.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem like this is a death march anymore, so I'm
there's that.
Happy to report that. So back at it at Assembly Hall Tuesday night, 9 o'clock tip against Wisconsin, which I believe was number 22 this week.
That might be back to a rock fight.
Yeah, very, very likely could be exactly that. But we're used to that at this point, and let's go from there. So see you at home.